Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the third turn of the Shadow Tech goddess, Stenibelle. When last we visited this crazy world, our heroine, Stenibelle, was making her way to Cana with her friends, Lord Aram and Lady Alesta, aboard the Damathalon John. They seek the rural passes of Cana so that Lady Alesta can conjure up the mystical Marian's Road and deposit Stenibelle squarely on the George Parr, which is far away in the deep emptiness of space, or the deep sea as I call it. Some people think when I say the deep sea I actually mean the water. That's not what I mean. I mean empty, cold, frozen space, and where she can proceed with her mission to discover the location of long-lost Camera, which apparently is in the head of Melazar of Caroline, a tropist of Rodrigo of Bergen. And in case you're wondering what a tropist is, it is a profession of sorts common in Zaphan space where a qualified tropist can induce an orgasm upon your person with innocuous touches, usually on the hand, the wrist, the neck, or the thigh. So that's basically what she's doing all day long, is touching him on his wrist, probably giving him orgasms. These are Zaphans we're talking about, people. They're not all there. Yeah. Stenibelle has a creepy encounter with Morgan Jeterix, who, as you recall, is a plane-walking vampire known as the Tempest Findal. And Morgan subjects Stenibelle to a fear soak, which means she just hit her with her wall of fear, which she's able to create, and it can stop pretty much anybody in their tracks. This isn't fear you can overcome with metal or fortitude. This is of the arcane, and it will put you on your knees, which it did. Stenibelle was on her knees. She beat her pants, and Morgan says, I want you to stand up, and if you don't, I'm just gonna suck you dry and move on, which Morgan is fully capable of doing. Stenibelle manages to revel in some memories of her past with her sisters and the good times she had at Belmont Manor by the sea, and manages to wobble up off her knees, which impressed Morgan. She then quit the fear soak and told her, if you can stand up to that, you can stand up to anything. Later, Stenibelle gets a call from her former benefactor, Hannah Ben Sherlamp, and she is pissed off. Told her, I cut you off and now I'm gonna ruin your household. And Stenibelle, able to function now after the fear soak, isn't intimidated into a corner like she's been in the past, is able to talk the professor out of it. Says, you want this info, I'm in the position to get it for you, and I will have it for you by tomorrow. The professor says, well, okay, I don't know how you're gonna get aboard the George Parr when it's out in the deep sea, so I'll just ruin one of your sisters for now, and if you actually do get on the George Parr, I will restore her assets. No harm done. Stenibelle selects her pretty much impoverished sister Calamy, who doesn't really have a whole lot of money. She doesn't live a rich lifestyle. By choice, the professor went ahead and froze all her assets. So now we proceed with the story as the Damathalon John makes its way through the emptiness of space to the green ball of Cana. A couple pieces of business need to be taken care of first, and then we get to the George Parr, the meat of the story. And so far, Stenibelle basically has been propped up most of the story. She's depended on the people around her to help her get by. Once she's on the George Parr, she will be on her own, and we will see how that goes. So let's proceed immediately. Chapter 7, All Alone. Come in, Lieutenant Gwendolyn said. The door meekly opened. Stenibelle entered Lieutenant Gwendolyn's tiny quarters, hat in hand. The walls were bare white paint on metal, riveted and ducted, sporting no personal effects whatsoever. The small bed in the back of the quarters was tightly made to military standards. The closet was filled with nothing but fleet uniforms, each identical to the next. Lieutenant Gwendolyn was sitting at her table, a deck of painted cards sitting scattered in front of her. The cheerful cards were the lone bit of color in the room. Captain, I was hoping for a moment of your time, Stenibelle said. Gwendolyn extended a vacant hand. Come, Stenibelle wanted to sit down, but there wasn't another chair. She stood. I wanted to thank you for allowing us this passage. Gwendolyn responded in a dry voice. Your fare was paid. You've kept to yourselves. You've not inconvenienced us or impeded the operations of this ship. You've no need to thank me. Stenibelle had been avoiding this encounter all day. Belle, it would make me very happy if you would visit Lieutenant Gwendolyn and offer your apologies for what was done on Planetfall, Alesta had said. Stenibelle had come to love Alesta and Aram, to depend on them both for strength and direction. Alesta had asked, and she could not refuse. And deep down, she knew Alesta was right. She owed Lieutenant Gwendolyn a sincere, unsolicited apology. It had taken her several dreadful hours pacing about in her room to generate the courage to stand before her. I wish to apologize for attacking you on Planetfall. I want to say I'm sorry. We fought fair and square. I underestimated you and you beat me. I consider the matter closed. Gwendolyn locked eyes with her. It was brutal. If you'd like to fight again, I can assure you I will be more ready. Stenibelle raised her hands. Please, I don't want to fight you again. With her hands in the air, she waved them back and forth in a quick manner. Gwendolyn's watch appeared in her hand from nowhere. I want to give this back to you. She held out the broken watch. Gwendolyn reached out and took it. I had thought this lost, she remarked. I'm sorry I damaged it. May I compensate you for it so that you may buy a new one? Gwendolyn closed her eyes. My watch cannot be replaced. She placed the watch on the tabletop. It sat there motionless, like a corpse. The two lingered there in silence. The deed was done. Stenibelle had come to give the watch back and apologize, and Lieutenant Gwendolyn had listened. She had imagined offering her a hastily aworded apology, and then leaving as quickly as possible to the safety of her room. Now that it was done, Stenibelle found herself not so eager to leave. The kiss, the power. In another universe, they loved each other. The Merthig will give you power. Gwendolyn is the Merthig. Put your tongue in her mouth, Morgan had said. May I see it for another moment, please? Stenibelle asked. Gwendolyn looked at her. Why? Just for a moment, please. Gwendolyn slowly slid the watch across the tabletop. The crystal face was cracked, the mechanism damaged. May I ask where this watch came from? It obviously means a great deal to you. It was a gift. You gave it to her, came Alesta's words. Stenibelle shook her hands and produced a fine set of lockpicks and other precision tools and laid them out on the table. Gwendolyn watched her conjure these items up from nowhere without surprise or interest. She seemed lost, or in another place. I think I can fix this, she said. Stenibelle turned the watch over and skillfully removed the back plate, exposing the damaged workings within. That seemed to catch Gwendolyn's interest. Are you a watchmaker? Gwendolyn asked, studying her as she worked. No, she said, but I was taught to be skilled with my hands. She selected a few tools from her kit and began working. This seems beyond repair to me. Who gave this to you? Stenibelle again asked, already knowing the answer. Was it someone dear to you? Gwendolyn sat quiet and didn't say anything. Captain, if you must know, I was given my watch by a person from my dreams. I'm certain that sounds rather silly, doesn't it? A proper daughter, apprentice, and Xenon does not dwell on dreams. But one night, there he was. I saw him in my dream standing by my bed. And then the next morning, there was my watch sitting there on the nightstand. Gwen paused, puzzled. I can't rightly recall having ever told anyone that before. My parents and my sisters often question me on the matter, wondering who the mystery man is, but I've always remained mum. Why did I tell you just now, I wonder? Stenibelle turned her eyes up from her work for a moment. Perhaps we are closer than you might think. I thank you for sharing that with me. I gave it to you, Gwen, and then I took it away. Gwendolyn had a large, square face. Stenibelle mused. I probably couldn't get my tongue halfway to your tonsils, even if I tried. She sighed. Have you ever had a dream so wonderful, Lady Belmont, that it makes every moment afterwards unbearable? Have you? I think I have. Yes, Stenibelle agreed. I've looked for this man. He must exist. My watch exists. I've spent hours in FleetCom searching for him, describing his features to the database. Nothing is ever found. I cannot locate him. He's just a ghost. And you've fallen in love with this man from your dreams? Gwendolyn's hand went to her breast for a moment and then fell. A bit of naked emotion came out across her face and then retreated back within. She nodded. I will love no other. She looked hard at Stenibelle. Your eyes are like his. Same shade, same patterns, same bits of light and dark. Stenibelle blinked. You can see that much detail all the way across the table? I have sight like no other. I can see like a Vith. I can see your beating heart in your chest and the vuncula you have hidden under your coat. Gwendolyn seemed puzzled. Why am I telling you these things? My deepest secrets. Who are you? We fought not days ago and you broke my watch. I should hate you, but I don't. I've not had issues hating people in the past, and for lesser offenses. Maybe it's because your eyes are like his. Gwendolyn has the sight. Only the Vith have the sight, like Captain Davidge, Aram had told her. As a Merthig, Gwendolyn will be able to do things she wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. She derives that ability from her connection to you. It's a symbiotic relationship. You give each other power. Perhaps that man you seek is closer than you think. Stenibelle adjusted the workings and repaired several springs. She put everything back into place with minute skill. She gave it a shake, and the watch began ticking again, moving with a precise beat. See? Anything can be fixed, Captain. It just takes a little effort. She picked the watch up and held it out. Gwendolyn extended her hand to take it. Their hands touched. Allow me to offer a parting gesture for luck, Stenibelle said as she held Gwendolyn's hand. Just a simple offering we have in Tyrol, expressing my hope that your watch continues to beat. She swept her fingertips across the watch face and Gwendolyn's palm, and then gave 2 light raps with her knuckles. We call it the wish luck gesture, just a small touch that means a great deal to us. Gwendolyn stared at her hand. She took her watch and put it back on her wrist. She seemed to be 1,000 miles away, lost once again in her own head, searching for a phantom. I'm sorry, I should have offered you my chair. Where are my manners? It's all right. Stenibelle put her tools away and took her hat. I still owe you a new crystal, and I assure you I will make good on it. She slowly turned and headed to the door. She stopped. There was much to be said. She carried many of the secrets Gwendolyn had longed for. She was the answered prayer, the end of the journey. She was the phantom man, the watchman of Gwendolyn's dreams. Stenibelle hadn't wanted to come. Now she didn't wish to leave. She felt a connection, a tiny but unbreakable cord connecting her soul to Gwendolyn's. A cord that spanned the universes. All the hate she had felt for 7 months was gone, replaced by something else, something quiet but persistent and unavoidable. Alesta and Morgan were right, you and the Merthig. I'm to be leaving soon when we make birth. I'll not be back, Stenibelle said. No reaction from Gwendolyn. I want to give you something first. It's not much, but still, it taught me an important lesson, and perhaps it'll do the same for you. You've already given me my watch. I have more to give. She waved her hand and set a small photo on the table. She slid it towards her. What's this? Gwendolyn asked, turning her attention away from her watch. It's a photo I was given, and now I want to give it to you in turn. Gwendolyn took it and held it in front of her face. She studied it. I recognized Lord Aram and Lady Alesta, and there I am. I don't recall ever being photographed with either of them. Her eyes locked onto the tall, handsome image of Stenibelle as a man. They widened. Who is this man? Who is he? He's dressed like you. Gwen's eyes peeked over the top of the picture and fell on Stenibelle. I notice a resemblance. Is this man your brother, perhaps? Do you recognize him? I do. I know his face. She appeared a bit desperate. Please tell me you know who he is. Is that the man from your dreams? Yes he is. Do you know him? Do you know where he may be found? Stenibelle answered. I do know him. That man is not my brother. Lady Gwendolyn, I have no brothers. That man you see in the photo is me in a different reality, so I'm told. Gwendolyn was puzzled. Another reality? I don't believe in such things. There is no reality besides this one. That's what I once thought as well. But I have been taught different. There are many places, many realities. I'm just now coming to terms with such a prospect. Look at the photo, it's true. That is you, and the man standing there beside you is me. And look at us, in another place. Look how we love each other. Can you not see it in the photo? See that same watch on your wrist? I gave it to you. I came to you in your dreams. Though I was a man, these are truths I've come to know. Gwendolyn didn't reply. She stared at the picture with a hard, empirical expression. As her eyes moved up and down, her expression changed, a bit softer, more unsure and quizzical, trying to make sense of it. She was no longer in her hidden place. She was now right in front of her, listening with full attention. The watch, I'm told, is a gift I gave to you to commemorate the occasion of our engagement. I bought it in a fine jeweler's mark on Hoban. I wanted to give you a practical gift, something you could use every day. Gwendolyn flushed a little and Stenibelle stopped. I see you, she said. I'm listening. I know lies from truth. Are you lying to me? No. Then tell me more. Stenibelle looked around at the bare walls and cold metal of her quarters and felt closed in by it all. I wish I had more to tell. In many places, I am a man. Here, I am a woman. She reached out across the table and gently took Gwendolyn by the cheek, allowing her fingers to explore the soft passes of her skin. She felt her fingers react to the touch, a slight sting and a trail of stirred memories. The power the Merthig gives you. I'm sorry, Gwen. I'm sorry that here I'm not the man you love, the man who gave you that watch. I'm sorry I'm not that person for you. I'm sorry you're all alone. You need the Merthig, and the Merthig needs you, Morgan had said, with considerable bile and envy. Her watch ticked. Gwendolyn sat down and looked at the picture, fading back into that private world she appeared to inhabit most of the time. Stenibelle took her leave, opening the door and passing through the latch, fastening with a cold, metallic clunk. The touch, the feeling it gave. As she closed the door, she lingered a moment. She heard the dim ghost of bitter weeping drifting out from within. You need the Merthig, and the Merthig needs you. She leaned against the door and put her hands to her heart. It was the most sorrowful sound Stenibelle had ever heard. A day later, the Demophalon John landed them via Ripcar in the center of nowhere, somewhere in the Midlands of Cana, and then took its leave. To the south were a line of soft purple mountains and patchy stands of fir trees. The terrain was very unfamiliar to Stenibelle, used to the windswept coasts and flat interior swamplands of Tyrol. Where in the name of creation are we? Morgan Jederick stood by. Fifth Land, Belle. Never been here before? I haven't. And please don't tell me that I knew this place in another reality, because it's really irrelevant. Morgan rolled her eyes and thought about it. I have no idea, actually. Well, that's a relief. Morgan pointed to the southwest. My home in Hala is that way, about 1,000 miles. There's green, good land in that direction across the mountains. Was? Stenibelle asked. Yeah, it was about 15 or 16,000 years ago. I can't quite remember. It's pretty much just a cursed field now where nobody goes. It's too creepy for them. Aram and Alesta got their bearings. Excellent. This is a good spot, yes. Here I can call the road. Remy, can you help me? She asked as she unbuttoned her boots. Aram went to her and she leaned against him. Alesta pulled her boots off and gave them to Aram. Now I shall call the road and transport you, Belle, to the George Parr. Give me a moment. She seated herself and raised her arms, the green sleeves of her robe falling down to her elbows. Stenibelle watched with interest. Aram approached her. It will take Alesta a few minutes to summon the road. While we're waiting, let me go over everything with you again, alright? While you were recovering from your bout with the Bolabungs, we managed to get permission to board the George Parr and go inside. Alesta has to have seen with her own eyes the location she wishes to travel to, and in this case, all we got to see was Deck 4, so that's where you're going to end up. Deck 4, near the aft of the ship. You're going to want to be faded into the shadows in case anybody happens to be passing, so they won't see you. Alright, no problem. Secondly, be very careful when going through locked doorways. I know you can pick locks with ease, but doing so will trigger an alarm at the comm station on the bridge, and they'll become alerted to your presence. Don't pick the locks if you absolutely don't have to. I remember that. Thank you, Aram. Good. Now here's the last thing. We will not be able to retrieve you off the ship. There's too much energy and power generated by the vessel. Alesta can deposit you there, but she cannot summon the road to the ship. The power will not allow the road to form like it needs to. It would be nice if we could. Stenibelle laughed. It would save us a lot of trouble, wouldn't it? You needn't worry. She reached into her HRN and pulled out a handful of 3 brown holy stones. She initially had several dozen, but after her robbing and kidnapping exploits on Planetfall, she was down to 3. Remember these? These will summon a black maiden who in turn will return any coded in its scent to my little work area on Planetfall. That is how I shall exit the George Parr once I have the location of camera. Okay, don't lose those, whatever you do. We will be watching from afar, and we'll do what we can to help you. Stenibelle affectionately tapped him on the cheek. Thanks. It'll make me feel secure knowing you're watching over me. From the north, a fog lifted and rolled in. Stenibelle felt a chill on the wind. The road comes. It's almost time, Aram said. Are you sure you have everything? Stenibelle checked her HRN. Its hidden pockets were full of holy stones and marzible and other kit. Her vuncula was coiled up and her Grenville 40 sat snug in her sash. Professor Sherlamp's Unimine was safe in its pocket. Yes, I'm ready. She glanced at Morgan. She was bursting with new confidence, and some of it she attributed to Morgan's fear soak. I'm sorry I'm such a square. Morgan chuckled. It's alright. I'm traveling myself here soon. You'll not see me again, but you will. Stenibelle absorbed that for a moment, had no idea what she was talking about, and disregarded it. Well then, excellent. I wish you luck with me, wherever I am. I think that cold thing you did will be a big hit. Would you like another jolt for old time's sake? Morgan smiled wickedly. No, thank you. Aram was cross. What jolt, Morgan? Nothing, just helping out. Dubious, Aram gave Stenibelle a hug, and she hugged him back. It's time. Be safe, Belle. I will, Aram, promise. Before she let him go, she took his hand and did her usual Tyrol wish luck gesture. Just a gentle swipe across his palm with her fingers and a few knocks with her knuckles. Speed well, my friend, and thank you for everything. She faded into the shadows and disappeared from sight. A fog rose up and formed into a long tunnel. Morgan and Aram then stepped back as the fog closed in and thickened. Stenibelle was lost in the fog, had no idea which way was which. She saw Alesta look back and open her mouth to say something, and then she was gone. Stenibelle was standing alone in a bare corridor. It was at least 10 degrees warmer than where she'd just been standing. She was on the George Parr, Deck 4, somewhere near the aft end of the ship, just as Aram said. Silent, and at the blink of an eye, she had traveled millions of stellar miles onto a moving ship at sea. She heard the distant throb of a well-running thermoplant and smelled the cool murkiness of processed, scrubbed oxygen. Invisible, she was alone. The deck was a bit shorter in height than that of a Triumph-class vessel, indicating it was a smaller class of ship. The floor was carpeted in a standard fleet weave of somber reddish color. The plumbing was exposed in blanketed pipes, and she didn't see any lock-in stations for the crew to use during battle. She was used to the lavish and, by comparison, posh environs of a Triumph-class ship where she once served as paymaster. This seemed more workmanlike and utilitarian, like a scouting ship, like Lieutenant Gwendolyn's ship. Gwendolyn. She was now very far from Gwendolyn. The corridor is clear. She checked her watch. 18 bells. She had to get a comm out to Professor Sherlamp as soon as possible. That was her first task, and she had to do it without alerting the comm officer on the bridge. Like the confused onset of a stroke, the professor's Cyril Cone information bubbled up and barged in. Deck 4, a habitation deck. This is where the crew lived, in their small billets. All around her were closed doors, one after the other, like a small, unadorned inn. She didn't hear any talking coming from the billets or sound of hollows or airnet. Nobody came in or out of the doors. The whole place had a vacant feel to it, and she didn't like it much. She tried one of the doors. It was locked. Not a surprise. Inside of every one of these billets was an unsecured comm terminal just waiting for her to use. The safe return of her sister Calamy's assets was just a picked lock away. Aram's warning flashed through her head. Don't pick the locks. She had to get into one of these billets, and she also had to stay undetected. She decided to wait a few minutes. Somebody was sure to come by. This was a working fleet vessel full of 157 crew and officers, and here was the heart of where they lived. She would wait. When somebody passed by, she would invisibly follow them into their billet and give them a quick kiss from her vuncula. She moved it within the folds of her coat, dipping the clawed tip into a pocket full of sleeping powder. She was ready. She waited. Time passed. Nobody came by. What was going on, she wondered. Where is everybody? The corridor was still, save the steady thrum of the thermoplant. Where was the knocking about, the hints of conversation, the opening or closing of a door, the regular cacophony of small, comforting sounds people made? As she waited and became uneasy, she wondered if anybody was on this ship at all. She wondered if she was the only soul aboard, having sailed on the New Faith. She often listened to the scary, spine-tingling stories that the crew liked to tell of lost ships, cursed ships, ghost ships. She remembered the one of the lost freighter, the Misty Parker, stumbling through the empty sea lanes of the League with no crew and no reasonable explanation as to what happened to them. Just gone, people gone. That story, those empty decks, the overturned chairs, and the abrupt lack of human habitation, and all the souls lost at sea, unburied and unanointed in death, truly terrified her. Perhaps the George Parr was a ghost ship too. What had Morgan said? Ships haunted. She wondered if Aram and Alesta were watching. This really stinks, guys. She waved up her 3 brown holy stones. Her ticket off the ship, feeling them in her hand, comforted her. She didn't want to stand there any further. Stenibelle decided to quit Deck 4 and proceed to the main mess. Once there, her plan was to select a crewman from those present. She would then follow the crewmen back to their billet, wherever that was, incapacitate them, and then make her all-important comm to Professor Sherlamp. Then she'd move on to the captain and Rodrigo Abergen, gather the data she needed, and get off this accursed ship. She put her holy stones away and ready to move out. The Cyril information, though ill-fitting and uneasy in her head, was amazing. Her knowledge of the ship was complete, as if she'd worked on it for 10 years. Thankfully, leaving the dreary quiet of Deck 4, she went up 2 decks and drifted towards the main mess hall, passing nobody along the way. The Cyril information was a bad guest in her head. It blanked her thoughts, it scrambled her memories, and poked her in the eye from behind. It also made her hallucinate. Seeing new things as she made her way triggered the Cyril, bumping in her head like a lunatic, rewriting the open slate of her thoughts. She thought she saw someone every so often standing in the distance, a tall figure in a dark blue fleet uniform that faded as fast as she'd seen it. As she moved, she became aware of a strange smell floating about, an earthy, dirty smell. It wasn't a sterile, approved smell one would expect to encounter on a starship. Starships smelled exactly how the Admiralty wanted them to smell. This smell was a harsh, ugly one, like rotten meat. It smelled like something was dead. Maybe the smell was a Cyril-inspired hallucination too, but she didn't think so. She quickened her pace. The mess was empty when she arrived. She fully expected the usual bustle of crew, both coming off their ships and preparing to begin. Life aboard a starship could be boring and dreary sometimes, and the mess hall was usually the heart of the ship, where the crew could engage in a bit of merriment and frivolity as they took their meals. The mess was never empty. Here, though, nothing. The tables and chairs were unoccupied. The galley was shut down. All the machinery was covered in a series of tarps lashed together. A basket of unappetizing wrapped sandwiches, a vending machine vending bagged kelsos, and another serving various cans of hot and cold beverages were all that was there. The cans on display in the vending machines reminded her of a lineup of little tombstones. Stenibelle was at a loss. Seeing this place empty when it should have been seething with life was quite soul-shattering for her. She didn't understand, and she had to make that calm to the professor. Nothing made sense. She felt the harsh strings of hysteria rattling around within her. Footsteps outside. The sound startled her. She drew her Grenville 40 and stepped back against the wall. What would come through the door? A human? A monster? Or a ghost? To her relief, a male crewman entered. At last, she felt she wanted to kiss him. "You're here! You exist!" But as she took in the sight of him, her previous state of unease returned. This man didn't look like a fleet crewman. His uniform was unkempt, his face and hair mussed. He was like a scabrous ghoul sloppily wearing a uniform. He selected a sandwich from the basket and pulled a can of water from the machine. Without saying a word, he turned and headed back out the door, passing right by her, not seeing a thing. Her fade into the shadows at least was working properly, and he had no supernatural powers to detect her. Stenibelle followed him. He moved down the corridor, slouching, rubbing his belly, going down 3 decks. More Cyril puttered around, giving her the grand tour of the ship, whether she wanted it or not. Another hallucination. Somebody was standing there at a side corridor. It was Gwendolyn. She was certain of it. She stood there, holding her hands to her eyes, cupping her fingers like a pair of binoculars, looking through them. "I see you." And she was gone. He entered a large room. More confusion, more Cyril Cone information claiming her headspace, slapping down any other less important thoughts. It told her she was in hold 1. The man sat down at a desk and unwrapped his sandwich. Stenibelle got a good look at the man as he ate. He wasn't registering in her Cyril Cone. There couldn't be any way Hannah Ben Sherlamp would miss a crewman. He must be new. Given his gruff appearance, the captain must be loose in the extreme with his standards. Something was very wrong on the ship, and she wanted to know what it was. Invisible and undetected, she continued on into the hold to have a quick look around. The hold was full of dozens of containers, all long and cylindrical, stacked up high. That smell, that horrible dead smell, came from the containers. It was enough to sicken her. These containers are just big enough to be a coffin. They had an ominous feel to them, as if something frightening was hidden inside. Though she didn't want to, she decided she needed to look inside and see what she was dealing with. She didn't want to be surprised with anything later on. Morgan Jederick's face of a crone and reaching with pitted claws might come out. She waded into the rows, selecting one at a convenient height. The lid was locked. The container didn't appear to be connected to anything that would give her position away if she opened it. She sashed her Grenville 40. A quick shake of her hand and she had her lockpicks out. She worked the lock. After several seconds, she had the lock picked and carefully swung the lid open. A terrible, earthy stench bellowed out, making her gag. "It's Morgan!" A female body was housed snugly within the container. She was wearing the uniform of a fleet crewman. Her curly brown hair, damp with sweat, was wrapped around her face. Her shoulders were slightly too wide for the container and were stuffed in at an uncomfortable oblong angle. Stenibelle reached in, brushed her hair aside, and saw her face. Cyril knowledge bubbled in. It was crewman Lessa, Lady of Walpole, assistant regular in the ship's audio-visual department. Was she dead? Was she the victim of some sort of spaceborne malady? The woman was alive, but she was burning up. Stenibelle could feel the heat radiating off of her. If she was sick, why wasn't she being treated? There weren't any medicality in there with her, no bagged fluids, no scanners or bio devices, no encrypted diagnoses and assessments on a chip. She was simply stuffed into a box and not a medical stasis unit, just a standard cargo container, and shut in like a bolt of cloth. Why wasn't she taken off ship and hospitalared? That's how the fleet handled the sick, especially within the core of the League, where treatment was easily reachable. The sick were not stored in the hold in a box. She looked around. Dozens of containers all around her, just like this one. Did each of these also contain a body? "What's going on out there?" came a voice. "Who there?" "I heard ya." The man overseeing the hold set his sandwich down and came to investigate. With a drawn Herkimer heat gun, he came wandering into the rows. She was still faded into the shadows, so he didn't see her, but he saw the open container, and he also saw Stenibelle's lockpick set. He picked it up, puzzled. "What the frag is this?" Fatoom! Stenibelle struck with her vuncula and got him in the neck, dosing him good with a revised, much less caustic sleep powder that Morgan had helped her to create while on the Demophalon John with supplies bought by Aram and Alesta. Stenibelle would not forget the money she owed them. She harbored the nightmare thought that this man was a ghoul and would resist her sleeping powder, and that he would stand there and laugh, teeth bared, eyes crazed, and tear her apart. But he fell forward and dropped to the floor seconds later, his weapon clattering from his limp fingers. He was just a man. Time was running out. She formed a plan. According to Professor Sherlamp's Cyril knowledge, Lady Lessa's billet was only a deck away on the accursed Deck 4. She could go in and use her unsecured comm terminal and possibly not be noticed by the comm officer on the bridge. She would need Lady Lessa to open the palm lock on the door. She indulged in a quick and rather lurid scenario, chopping Lessa's hand off and taking it with her, but dismissed it. Had she still been bunged up, that's what she would have done. She dragged the limp body of Lady Lessa out of the container and allowed her to ooze face down to the floor. She had a moment of inspiration. She'd used the man's workstation to make the comm. She turned to the horrid, unconscious crewman and planned to stuff him in the container, slamming the lid on the bugger. Gods, but was he heavy. The vuncula snaked out of her coat and gripped the man by his collar. Bracing herself, the vuncula lifted and dumped him in, his arms and legs sticking out of the sides like a gangly marionette. She stuffed in his arms and legs, placed a pink holy stone in his palm to keep him out, and shut the lid. So much for him. Stenibelle checked his workstation. The invasive serial information that slapped her in the face wasn't good news. No comm terminal, just a shipboard interlink. Plan B. Get to Lessa's billet. She scooped Lessa up and carried her fire brigade style over her shoulders. She wondered what would happen should she encounter anybody along the way, the random passerby seeing a woman floating bent over on air. It might make for a memorable scene, but as before, she encountered no one. Back to haunted, lonely Deck 4, this time in the company of an unconscious, fevered crewman. As the Cyril tap danced through her head, she saw Gwendolyn a few more times, always standing in the distance looking at her. "I'll talk to you in a little bit, Gwen, I promised," she muttered. Here was Lessa's billet, number 47S. Her back was aching from the carry. Stenibelle manhandled her limp body up with the vuncula and managed to get her hand on the palm lock. The door fell open, revealing a dark interior. She dragged the woman in and closed the door behind her. It occurred to her that opening the door with the palm lock would also trigger a readout on the comm station. Not an alarm, just a passing bit of information that she hoped the comm officer wouldn't notice. Too late now. They were in. The room was freezing. The heat had been turned off. That was also a problem. Their combined body heat would rapidly raise the temperature of the room and signal the bridge yet again. She dragged the woman into the bathroom and rolled her into the shower. She hoped the cold tiles would help reduce her temperature. That done, she went back out into the room. On a nearby desk was the crewman's fleet comm terminal. At last. From here, she could reach Professor Sherlamp and get Calamy her assets back. She made her way to the crewman's comm terminal and fired it up. She produced the Unimine, got it out of its pouch, and set it down on the desktop. After a moment, it sprouted stalk-like silvery legs and moved on its own toward the terminal. More legs came out and it interfaced with the terminal at withering speed, bypassing fleet security and finding a secure line out of the ship. The codes it used triggered an amazing amount of relaying, jumping jumping from point to point, arriving at a restaurant in Hoban, bouncing off several freighters in space, continuing on, moving too rapidly for Stenibelle to follow. With luck, the transmission would not be noticed by the bridge. Eventually, the now familiar study and desk of Hannah Ben Sherlamp, paneled and padded in splendid finery, appeared on the screen, surrounded by the usual bewildering array of floating holographic screens. Given the abandoned state of the George Parr, given the haunted corridors and the unearthly stench, the hold full of bodies and the ghoul-like crewmen, seeing the grounded concrete professor in her wallpapered study was a relief. It helped beat back the lonely hysteria with a dose of solid, tangible reality. Professor Sherlamp sat there in her snowy white gown with her perfect ladylike posture. Her eyes flicked across her screens.
Lady Stenibelle, right on time. And I see you are indeed aboard the George Parr as promised.
She checked and double-checked several of the floating holographic screens, moving with army-like precision about her head, her brown eyes darting from one screen to another.
Yes, well done. I am quite impressed. I had my calendar cleared this evening so that I could destroy your house uninterrupted.
Then release my sister's assets at once, she said. The professor shook her glyph.
Done. That was so easy, wasn't it? Now then, I want the coordinates to Kamara and any other materials you happen upon by this evening, Kana Standard. I will wait no longer.
Stenibelle bristled. She was tired of cowing and being dictated to. In her previous encounters with the professor, she had been dominated, intimidated, humbled, and at a general loss for words. Now, after Morgan's fear soak, she didn't feel intimidated at all. As Morgan had said, no fear could ever equal the fear she'd been subjected to on the Demophalon John, and she felt almost nothing. She went on the offensive, her tongue wagging quite before she could stop it. You, madam, will wait until I'm good and ready to give you the information. Understand? I am to see Rodrigo of Bergen soon. He has the information, and then I'll have it.
I'll expect the information first thing in the morning, then. And I'd tread carefully, for Rodrigo of Bergen has a number of vile fungal infections. Best avoided if possible, should you choose to get the information out of him via sex.
Stenibelle was disgusted at the thought. She set herself and put the fear soak to the test. First, Professor, we've some bargaining to do, don't we? Hannah Ben Sherlamp sat back.
Do we? Consider your house.
I'm considering it even at this very moment. Consider your shame when someone else takes the credit for rediscovering Camera. I can see it clearly. You sitting in a vast audience with your plate of tasteless catered food growing cold in front of you as you politely clap with the others in the crowd as the spotlight turns to the stage, illuminating someone else. Imagine. The professor put her glyph down and regarded Stenibelle for a moment. She appeared somewhat impressed that Stenibelle had actually the gall to stand up to her.
I see, yes. That is quite the picture, isn't it? What do you want, then?
I was offered 5 million sesterces by a rival of yours.
5 million? Is that all? What rival of mine would be so pinchy with their payouts, I wonder?
She picked her glyph back up.
Shall I place the money in your personal account or in the General Belmont house coffers?
No, you don't understand. I want 30 million, and the general house coffers will do. The professor gave her a scalding look. Stenibelle heard a small whimpering coming from the bathroom. Lady Lessa must be stirring. How much is the secret worth to you, I wonder, she said, keeping the pressure up. Hannah Ben Sherlamp smiled and adjusted her wig. She moved her glyph again.
Very well, 30 million sesterces have been deposited. I must say, you do learn fast, Lady Stenibelle. Very admirable. But I wouldn't advise you to test me further. If you're planning on creating some sort of bidding war between myself and an anonymous second party, I would entreat you to not get greedy. Greed has its time and place, and it's not now. Allow me to compliment you. You have proved yourself capable and resourceful, and I appreciate those things. If you get me the data, there shall be more money to come, much more. Rest assured, more than you could possibly know what to do with. You'll find I'm a kind benefactor with unlimited resources. Use the Unimind. If Rodrigo of Bergen has the data encrypted on a device of some sort, then the Unimind will dig it out. Now then, I don't mind paying the price for trustworthy people, and as long as you serve me, I shall in return serve you. I can answer any question you have. I can supply you with anything you need. I can keep the wolves away from your house's throat, and I can back you up with an army if need be. I am a person you want on your side. My side is the winning side. Conversely, I am a deadly enemy when crossed. You must understand that by now. Don't cross me. Accept all that I have to offer, and we shall both prosper. I shall be here round the clock awaiting your transmission.
She calmed off. Stenibelle took a moment to be proud of herself. Well, Aram and Alesta, if you're listening, looks like I've got a pair of balls after all. Thanks for showing them to me. And with that, we conclude Chapter 7, All Alone. A very active chapter. Lots of things happened. Stenibelle finds herself becoming intrigued with Lady Gwendolen. And it's really not in a sexual way. It's more of in a spiritual way. She feels a connection with Gwen, as Aram and Alesta had said. A connection that's old and one that some parts of her know well, even though she's not quite understanding all of that. And she apologized to Gwen. She partially fixed her watch. And then she showed the photo that Aram and Alesta had given her. And Gwen looked at it and saw that Stenibelle was in fact a man in another universe. And the man who gave her watch from her dreams was staring at her in the photo. And she was desperate for information, and Stenibelle told her what she could. And the connection is established, and it starts to grow on Stenibelle. And she listened to her cry through the metal of her door and felt her heart going out to Gwendolen. We'll see how that relationship progresses as the story continues. Aram and Alesta deposit her on the George Parr, and the ship is kind of unusual. There's nobody around. It smells weird. When she encounters a crewman, he's sloppy and unkept and not registering in her serial information, so he's not a listed crew member. I don't know, she doesn't know where he came from. And in the hold, like an undertaker, were dozens of boxes that she assumes contain the bodies of the crew. And she investigates one and finds this lady, and the lady registers in her serial info, Lady Lessa of Walpole. Lady Lessa of Walpole is always the damsel in distress. If you read the Shadowtech Goddess, you recall Lady Lessa. There she is again. There she was in another universe in distress, and she's in distress here. Stenibelle uses Lady Lessa to open the door to her room so that wouldn't trigger an alarm. She gets her all-important message to Professor Sherlamp, and she actually negotiates a hefty price, as she proved that she could get aboard the ship, and Hannah Ben Sherlamp appreciates that. Thank you once again to my good friend, artist, and burgeoning Twitcher, Carol Phillips, for reading Hannah Ben's lines. Well done as always, Carol. Check Carol out on Twitch, Carol Phillips Art, and you won't be sorry. Next week, Chapter 8, Crew in Limbo, as Stenibelle begins unraveling the mystery of what's going on the George Parr and begins her quest to get the data for camera and get off this creepy-ass ship. She's got her 3 holy stones. She's got 3. She had a bunch, but she used them for robbing and abducting on planetfall and hasn't had a chance to restock them, so she's got 3 stones. Don't mess them up, Stenibelle. I assure you, you don't want to do that. Anywho, next week we will continue Chapter 8, Crew in Limbo. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.